So I think what we've looked at so far is really the most important part of Thomson's essay and the heart of it, and what's really memorable, especially this idea that uh, very interesting idea that abortion may in fact be completely compatible with the idea that the fetus has a right to life because of this qualification that the right to life is not absolute, but is really the right to not be killed unjustly. But she goes on here and she makes some pretty important admissions, I believe, or concessions to the anti-abortion position. One of them is here on page 59, where she says, make it a little bigger. She says, it seems to me that the argument we are looking at can establish at most that there are some cases in which the unborn person has a right to the use of its mother's body, and therefore some cases in which abortion is unjust killing. And that would be, this difference between voluntary pregnancy and involuntary pregnancy, and that there may be some cases in which it could be said that the fetus does have a right to the mother's body because the mother has more or less invited the fetus in. I don't know. That would take a lot more. I think she recognizes it. She says we should leave this open, and she doesn't resolve it. The other important issue towards the end of the essay she gives is this idea of Samaritanism and doing what's morally decent, which is also quite interesting, right? Because she makes a distinction between what one ought to do for somebody morally and what one has to do to avoid violating that person's rights. And I think the distinction is that well, let's just say that we go back to, she says, let's go back to the famous violinist who's hooked up to you. It's one thing to require you to be hooked up to him for 9 months in bed. It's another to be hooked up to him for 10 minutes or an hour. And what she says is minimal moral decency would, if you needed to be hooked up to him for an hour to save his life, minimal moral decency would require that you do it. However, if you refuse to do it, that does not mean that you've done an injustice to him, because he does not have the right even to an hour of your body. So that's quite interesting. And I think that its application to abortion is the idea that in some cases, it may be that carrying a pregnancy to term, in some cases, is the morally decent thing to do, the minimally morally decent thing to do. But that if you were to terminate the pregnancy, that would not mean necessarily that you had done an injustice to the fetus. Which is quite an interesting distinction. I don't know if it, how much it really, if it can really bear that much scrutiny, but it's another incredibly interesting aspect of this essay.